I'm still learning how to use a computer, Vito. I apologize.
It's okay. You're only, half a century old.
I, I'm a Luddite. What can I tell you, man? You know, I've done
You've
so
always
many web comics. Half of my career, or more than half of my career, is making web comics, and yet still somehow I am computer stupid.
like
How are
Sisyphus
you?
miss, like Sisyphus miss. I cannot bear another boulder. That was a
Are
weird.
you feeling better?
I'm feeling great. How are you feeling?
I'm okay. It's a little rainy here today in
Hey,
Brooklyn. What about same
yeah.
for you?
I, as you can see, I'm wearing a hoodie. I don't usually wear a hoodie because I'm usually not this cold. But I was like, man, it's chilly back here. You know,
Yeah. It's
being in the bathroom. Um,
Wait. Who's on your chest? Is that Rance Hosley?
no, it's Malcolm X, man.
Oh.
I'm sure Rance will appreciate that shout out.
Actually, I just got one of Rance's Substack or newsletters,
Uh-huh.
and he talks about how he likes to write about what movies he sees every month on
Yeah.
his Facebook, but he's like, splitting Facebook. And so he's going to put it in his Substack. And like this list, it's like 30 movies that he saw in January,
God, I wish I had the time.
right? What the hell? The amount of movies he saw in this month, I'm going to see this year, probably.
And I'll probably see a fraction of that.
Oh my God.
Do you
All right.
do you like anime?
Eh.
Um I
I don't
just
know. I haven't seen enough. I haven't seen enough.
I just restarted watching Demon Slayer. It's a very it's gorgeously animated. And Sadie's the one that got me into it. Um but I just we like the I think they're gonna do a movie that is basically the entirety of the final season. So they're
Hmm.
going to put it out in a movie or something to that effect. And so I think that's next month. I just figured, you know what? I kind of miss watching these with my daughter, and I kind of want to refresh the whole thing. So we just started rewatching it, and I kind of want more people to watch it because it's so good. Like it really is good. And then on Netflix, they have an anime called Pluto, which is it's based on a story that happened in Astro Boy. The famous Astro Boy little robot. And the name of the story was the greatest. I think it's like the greatest robot in the world, and it's about how this. It's basically a serial killer going around named Pluto, killing all these robots, and how they, like how they defeat this thing. And it's a brilliant manga. Um, and then like the anime is almost pitch perfect. Like it's just so
Right.
like and like it's the one manga I tell everyone to read because it's basically a crime noir, like it's
Right.
not
Right.
your typical manga. So the anime
Right.
um like works really well. They do these really great flashes of art, kind of like how Kirby would do his like the backgrounds that were like photostats.
Oh, collage.
Thank you.
Let's call them
Collage. Yeah.
collage.
So,
Right. Right.
like it's almost like that, but not
Right. Right.
not quite. But yeah, it's really good. I highly recommend those. But I know we're not
Yeah.
doing recommendations or anything, but it was just
Well, we could. I mean, whatever. This is what when you and I talking to each other, which is the spirit of this show, is about recommendations. I have a funny relationship with animation because I don't like most animation. I saw that there's a new Spider-Man animation featuring like a young Peter Parker type thing, and I think they're even selling it as looking kind of like 1960s Silver Age comics.
right.
And I gotta say, the little ad I saw of it looked pretty cool. And I might watch that maybe because it tickles my fancy, my sensibility, right? But in general, like everyone was talking about the new Batman cartoon. I watched two
Yeah.
episodes and it was okay. I didn't like looking at it, like I don't like most animation. It just doesn't interest me. And I know that DC, for instance, has a ton of animations, right? Where they'll
Yeah.
they'll do an adaptation, right? And I one night I was like, I was too tired to watch what I wanted to watch, so I decided let me crack one of these, and it was The Killing Joke. Have you seen The Killing Joke, by the way, the animation?
I saw no, I saw the Long Halloween and I saw the Dark Knight Returns, which I thought were both very faithful adaptations. I think they're really good. But
So
The
this is
Killing
interesting.
Joke,
I don't know if this is considered to be faithful or not. So The Killing Joke, which is the famous Batman story that was written by Alan Moore and drawn by Brian Boland, right?
mhm.
Great story. Added a lot of new value to the Joker and the Batman Joker relationship, right? I started watching this adaptation, and an hour in, 1 hour into, I think it's a 2 hour movie, I had yet to see anything from the comic.
Yeah,
And I think Dwayne McDuffie or somebody might have written it.
it couldn't have
And it
been
was a
Dwayne.
whole other story. It was a
Yeah.
whole other, and they were selling it like it had the cover of,
Mhm.
Joker taking this snapshot, with his camera and cracking a smile. And I was just like, what happened here? And again, I'm not even criticizing the story. I just thought, wait, was there something left on the cutting room floor of the Alan Moore book that they're using here or something? It was I haven't finished it yet, so I don't have a total response. But I guess you hadn't seen that one yet.
I hadn't, but weirdly enough, I was very excited to watch the Crisis on Infinite Earths adaptation, and they did it in three parts. And they were selling it as the end of the DC animation universe
Hmm.
because of everything coming under James Gunn and Peter Safran as they've taken over DC, or not DC, but Warner Brothers, um, at least the DC Studios side of it. They are kind of cutting ties with all of the stuff that came before to kind of jump into everything new, which is great. Um, Especially because I don't know why anyone would want to be tied to this Crisis on Infinite Earths adaptation.
Oh
It
yeah.
dog shit. Like
Really?
absolute, oh my God. So the first,
Really?
so it's three parts, right? The first part was decent. It gave you enough of the feel of the original story that made you say, okay, I don't know where this is going, but if this is where it's starting, it feels familiar. It feels like it's going to, get into places where I can recognize it. And then what they did in the second part was um, it became an origin story for two characters. And it's important to understand one of the characters was, I want to say Pariah. Pariah? No, maybe it was Psycho Pirate, who plays a big part in the original story. And then the other one was Harbinger. The big thing about this adaptation is they made Harbinger, or they made Supergirl into Harbinger, which was a cool little twist, but not enough, because then Supergirl famously dies in it.
Right.
It starts to really lose any kind of like whatever tenuous grasp on the source material I had in the first one. It kind of started just grasping at straws and throwing it away.
Well, it's funny you say that because sometimes when you're too close to the source material, you can be more criticized on the success of the adaptation, right?
Right.
But when you veer way far away and try to capture just the essence of said source material, I thought that the Watchmen TV show was
I love it.
awesome.
I love it.
And it, like, yes, it had tethers and it had characters, and it's years later from the original Watchmen, and that was a good leap to the point where I'm I think I've heard somebody else say this or read this somewhere that it might have even been a different show that was pitched, and then they worked in the Watchmen aspects and then
Mhm.
escalated those ideas. I
Right.
don't know, but it's got a perfect ending. It's a great story. It added a more cool story idea
I
to
agree.
the
I
Watchmen.
agree. And in watching it, I was very cognizant of Alan Moore's infamous I don't want to see it, I don't want to know it exists, I don't want to be part of it. Where to the point now, if you're reading comics that were written by Alan Moore that he has disowned, it
Right.
won't say his name on the book. It'll say author the or something like the original author, and that's all it'll say, and Dave Gibbons,
Right,
something like that.
right, right, right,
Um,
right.
he's distanced himself from all of it, and it's a very it's a very kind of sad morality play to watch how Alan Moore's work has been uh, used and bastardized and kind of put up for consumption of people that weren't around during the first Watchmen, even. But
Mhm.
to say that it's not worthy of it, or to say that it's I don't want to know it because it's not the like I think he's missing out, and I don't know Alan Moore. I've never talked to him, never met him or anything like that. I just feel like it's a sad state of affairs if you can't enjoy something you made be turned into something bigger.
All right,
Um,
so this is interesting because this actually leads to I did come up with three questions because part
okay.
of our podcast is questions. Um, and this is kind of adjacent to this, but just to give context to people who don't know Alan Moore and how he disassociated himself. I'm actually forgetting why. What was it exactly? Was it because initially he and Dave Gibbons created Watchmen,
Yeah.
which was actually a pitch for the Charlton characters that DC was absorbing, and he came up with a really cool concept for the Charlton characters. And then I think because it was a little risque, they were like, you know what? Why don't you just create new characters and we'll do something else with the Charlton characters? And then in the contract, like all the contracts that you sign, it's kind of a work for hire, even though you're creating and you get. I don't know if in the 80s they had this. They might have it more now in contracts where if you actually do create, you have a participation in that definitely, and how well it does. And it's up to DC Comics or the publisher of anything to try to make as much money off of this idea, this IP as possible.
Right.
And guess what? Nobody knew Watchmen would blow up the way it blew up, and it sells to this day.
Yeah.
So DC, as long as DC can make money on it, they still kind of own it. And I think there was this idea that it should go back to the creators after what, 5, 10 years or something. And
Right.
that's not how it works. And they know that when they signed the contract.
I
And
think
Dave Gibbons knows that. And I've talked to Dave about it, and he's cool with it.
yeah,
He's
I think
okay.
what happened was the original contract was for 5 years. Not for 5 years, excuse me. It would go out of print. Then the second it went out of print, from the moment it goes out of print 5 years later, it would revert
Right.
back to them.
Yeah.
So it never went out of print.
Never went out of print.
It like here's a sad thing, man. First prints sell out, you do a second print.
Yeah.
Second print sells
Yeah.
out, you do a third. I
Right.
couldn't tell you how many printings Watchmen is on to now. They're now doing these compact comics that you find in like major retailers like Target, like Walmart, bookstores, and everything. They're almost manga size, and like they're $9.99. They're super cheap
Yeah.
for like
Yeah.
Watchmen, which I think retails normal size 19.99 to 24.99, something like that.
Sure.
9.99 for All Star Superman or Watchmen or Batman Court of Owls, all the different ones they're doing. It's getting into more hands now. It's
Yes.
more affordable and everything, and that's great. Not so great for Alan Moore, but
Well, I mean, except this. What do you mean not so great? Because again, I'm not Alan Moore, and I don't know what it's like to be him. And he's an amazing writer. Okay,
sure.
but I know, for instance, Dave Gibbons is doing very well with what he gets every year, the chunk of
Yeah,
money,
yeah,
and he can never have to work again, probably. And also because he's done so many other fantastic comics,
yeah.
like, he's a legend, right? But Alan Moore too could be, and I don't know if he's rejecting the monies or if he's taking the monies. I think he is rejecting the monies,
Yeah.
and he's
He's taken
rejecting
his
the
name
credit
off
and
of
everything.
everything, and like I know famously for I think it was for League of Extraordinary Gentlemen while it was at DC before it went to Top Shelf. Um, we could spend this whole entire hour talking about Alan Moore because there's a lot to talk about.
Yep.
So I apologize if there's anyone watching or listening that doesn't get the context of what we're saying. It's not entirely inside baseball, but it can be. Um,
Mhm.
my best advice to you would be we can't spend the entire hour. So go to Wikipedia. It'll have it all written out.
Yeah.
But, and probably more accurately than Dean and I will remember. But what happened was he had soured on working with DC at that point. I think Paul Levitz and Jeanette Kahn were the heads of DC at the time. And he had soured on working with DC at any point. He had worked at Image. He did the 1963 series of books, which are basically what if Alan Moore created the Marvel Universe. They're fantastic. Rick Veitch, Steve Bissette, I think, also worked on them. They're incredible. They're in back issue bins. I don't think they've ever been collected. So if you like back issues, you like hunting, go try to find those books. They're really good. But
also, I don't think he finished that series. I think he has one issue outstanding, I believe.
I believe so. I think.
And, yeah.
But that's probably why it was never collected, now that I think about it. I believe that experience kind of endeared him to Jim Lee. And Jim Lee at the time had Wildstorm, which was his imprint at Image. So Alan Moore created The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Top 10, Tom Strong.
It was at DC. It was, I think, Wildstorm was
not yet
at DC. Oh, really?
Not when Alan Moore signed his contract, or not when he started working on these briefs.
Right.
That's when Jim Lee sold Wildstorm to DC, and so Alan Moore was just like, "Well, I'm not working with DC. I will work with Jim, and I will work with Scott Dunby, and that's all I'm going to work with." At some point, I don't know, I don't recall how the falling out happened from Wildstorm DC to lead Alan Moore to bring everything to Top Shelf. I know that he finished Promethea. It took a couple of years. I know that he handed off Tom Strong to, I think, Steve Moore is his name, no relation.
Right. To write it, yeah.
10, yeah, Top 10, I think, finished. What
was the anthology book? He had an anthology with like all those cool characters.
Yes, with Gray Shirt, which was done by Rick Veitch.
Right.
I forget the name of it, but that anthology.
It was like a smart kid, and there was like a Plastic Man kind of character. It was made out of ink, right?
By Hilary Barta, yeah.
Hilary Barta, yeah.
So he's a complicated guy. He's got his own ethics, which there should be more of that in this world. For creatives and stuff. I admire him for that. I also think that at some point you just have to say this is the nature of the business. We are work for hire, no matter what. Even when we're working for ourselves, we're kind of working for someone else in a sense.
He also did the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen that I think Top Shelf kept publishing.
Yes.
But what I'm thinking, because we're going from, we've already established it, we're in the Diamond Age, which is the distribution, have already entered the Kickstarter age. Could you imagine Alan Moore kickstarting a comic?
Oh my God! Like if he were interested in just, if I can't imagine that there's not a day that goes by that he doesn't say, I have a new idea. And then at some point during the day, while he's fleshing out this idea, he goes, this would make a good comic. And then at some point he says, goddamn comics, I can't deal with comics anymore. And
that's what it is.
That's
what it is.
And I get that to an extent. I don't understand him. I don't think anybody can understand him. He's a very enigmatic person. But there will be, like, I get the idea of coming up with an idea and then just fleshing it out in my head and just saying that's a great comic, and just like, but I don't get the idea that like being sour on it, because there are so many avenues now. I don't know that this is one of your questions that you wanted to ask, but I know you asked it earlier in the week. You're like, what is a comic in 2025? And
that's one of my questions.
Okay. So let's get into it then.
Okay. Can I do two? Hold your thought. Absolutely. Two quick thoughts. I just want to finish up the animation question.
Yes.
The kind of animation I like, that I've come to like, that I enjoy, is Pixar.
Mm-hmm.
I really dig the Spider-Verse thing that they're doing.
Yeah.
The Spider-Verse animation.
Mm-hmm.
And then I forget his name right now, but I think he's like a Russian animator who did Samurai Jack, like Tartovsky.
Yeah, Tartovsky, yeah.
Unbelievable. Like, I really loved that.
Steven DiStefano, who we both know. Steven DiStefano,
right.
longtime cartoonist, been working in animation for at least 25, 30 years at this point. He worked
Right.
with him on a couple of different pop projects as well.
So that's the trifecta, and of course, growing up with Bugs Bunny, Looney Tunes, like
Mhm.
that's in my blood, right? Like whenever
Yeah,
I see that, I love that stuff, and that stuff has I don't even think has been matched since. And then
it's evergreen.
the golden the top of the 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 heap is the Fleischer Superman cartoons for me.
Mm.
That there's a sensibility to the stories, to the animation, to everything about that just I wish I saw more comics that look like that. So
Can I throw another
yeah.
animation at you and see what your reaction is? There was a point where every night at 9 o'clock, I would take James into bed and Sadie would join us, and we would all three watch Tom and Jerry for at
Oh,
least an hour and a half, if not 2 hours. And I'm 50 years old at this point, like while this is happening, I'm cackling, laughing. Like I can't think like as much as I love Bugs Bunny, and I do love Bugs Bunny. I think Bugs Bunny, for a lot of us, informs our senses of humor. Um, Much like the Marx Brothers or the Three Stooges, because we were exposed to them at such a young age. I think those things are kind of like you said in our DNA.
yeah.
Tom and Jerry, I fallen off of it for so long, and then like coming back into it with my kids, and we like all of us would just die laughing. And man, Gene, was it Gene Deitch that worked on those?
Oh, I don't know that. Like I've
Gene or
met
Kim?
Gene.
I think it's Gene.
Okay.
Worked on them in I want to say the 70s and stuff. And
Right.
when you watch like the Hanna-Barbera ones, like because there is a section of Hanna-Barbera ones, there's a section with a couple of different animators that might have come out of a different studio. And like then you get to Gene Deitch, and there's such a weird charm to it because it's not
Mm-hmm.
like it doesn't look like Tom and Jerry. Their proportions are a little weird. They talk in like sound effects. They don't talk like like it's the weirdest thing, and they're so good. Like I never like when I was a kid, I hated anything that wasn't the stuff that I was used to. So when that
Right.
stuff came in, it was like this isn't Tom and Jerry, But like as an adult, I start watching them. I'm like, these are really funny. Like these are like
Yeah.
there's still something to them.
Right.
But yeah, I
Well,
just
that goes back to the idea of like being open to adaptation,
yeah,
for better or for worse. Like sometimes it's crappy, sometimes it's like it veers in a way you're like, what? What is happening? But that's also true for, I mean, everything, not everything, but I think there's this idea that a Spider-Man, a Batman, or whatever, every 5 years it turns over and they're trying to
right,
resell it to you in a
right,
different way, right? The other ones I love was like Mighty Mouse, Ren and
yeah.
Stimpy. Speaking of Tom and Jerry, like I got a bunch of Tom and Jerry DVDs for Jen 2 Christmases ago because she was begging for that, and I think it's because she's such a fan of Buster Keaton that
Oh
maybe Tom
yeah.
and Jerry has that Buster Keaton kind of vibe, like all these obstacles and chases. And, I remember one day watching a really bad cartoon that I liked as a kid, but when I looked at it now, I was like, this is not good. Do you remember Courageous Cat and Minute Mouse?
Created by Bill Finger, I believe.
No,
No,
Bob
Bob
Kane.
Kane. Thank you.
Bob Kane. That's right. So he
Yeah.
had one idea twice. Okay. But
I
hey,
did.
what an idea, right? With Bill
I,
Finger.
it's funny that
Respectfully.
you say that you watched it recently. You're like, these are trash, or they're not as good as you remember them being.
Yeah.
I had the same reaction to the same cartoon about 4 years ago. I was so like, I gotta find these. I gotta find these, and I watched
Uh-huh.
them. I was like, this is a long slog to get through 15 minutes, if that.
Yeah.
Just like
Yeah.
painful.
Yeah.
Um,
But I've come to, I've already stated for 40 years that the Thing is my favorite character in comics.
mhm,
And I, as a kid, rejected uh the cartoon where it was like Thing Ring Do Your
do your
Thing was
thing.
like a kid puts
Mhm.
on a thing ring and becomes the thing. But now as an older man, I'm like, bring it on, man. Like, let's do this.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
I don't know why.
I don't know that nostalgia is funny. Like I at one point uh Boy, this will really explain a lot about me in a second here. At one point, I got very, you might even remember this. I got very into Blue Falcon and Dynamite. Do you
Yeah.
remember them? So
Yep.
it was basically like in the Scooby-Doo universe, in the Hanna-Barbera universe, there was a Batman type character who had a sidekick that was a dog that had like a bionics, let's say. And the thing is, the dog was the appeal. Like the dog was the lead of the story, uh,
Right.
not so much Blue Falcon. Blue
Right.
Falcon was kind of like he just kind of fell into the superheroing, but the dog
Right.
was the real hero or something, even though the dog was clumsy. So
Right.
I, at one point, I'd say about, boy, this is probably right after I quit Hanley's. Um, I had approached Joey Cavallari, who, um, longtime editor at DC, um, really one of
Special
the
projects. A lot of great special projects.
yeah, one of the nicest guys you'll ever talk to. So much fun. He and I, we really would go back and forth on the Marx Brothers and stuff. And I said to Joey, because he had been working mostly on some of the Cartoon Network stuff, I said, I want to pitch Blue Falcon, but I want to pitch it serious. Like I want to pitch it as if it were to be happening today. And he had told me at the time, I can't even look at this pitch because to do a pitch with Cartoon Network, Warner Brothers characters, we have to pay Warner Brothers for the license to do it. And so I cut to, God damn it, 10, maybe 7 years later when they were doing all those with Doc Shaner and, like all those cartoons. I think Jeff Parker, who's
Yep.
probably a friend of both of ours.
Oh
And they
yeah.
were
I've
great.
worked with Jeff. Yeah.
Yeah, they were fantastic. But like again, just like I said last week, I'm ahead of my time. Like like I knew
Yeah.
exactly. And
Yeah.
cut two. So I'm talking to Eric White, who worked in animation at Warner Brothers, worked with Darwin Cook, uh, cartoonist in his own right. He had a book called Frankie Pickle over at I want to say Scholastic. Anyway,
I believe Whitney worked either for him or adjacent to him because there was this kids kind of online hub called Epic or Epics.
yeah, yeah.
And I think he was like the art director of that, and she
Hmm.
wrote some stuff for that. And anyway,
So Eric
I
and
know
I
Eric White.
were putting together a story of Wildcat for Justice Society, JSA Classified. And we got one cover. He did the cover. I got paid for the whole thing. Never sees. It'll never see print. I doubt. I can almost guarantee that, which is terrible because I got paid for it. He got paid for that cover, and that cover's amazing.
Oh,
So Eric and I are sitting at New York Comic Con at lunch, and I said, "Who do you know at Warner Brothers Animation that I can try to pitch this Dynamite idea to?" And I started explaining it to him, and going into the whole thing. And he goes, "Dude, just do your own Dynamite."
I mean,
And that's how I put a bionic dog in Stray.
that's exactly why. I mean, that's you can't. The only problem I've ever had with pitching is when the pitch is so specific to the character or concept that I'm pitching for and can't be really. I mean, there's so many stories you can massage into
Yeah.
something quote original, or you're doing a satire, a parody, or whatever. You can because it's not quote canon. But I do think creators create, and you can't stop yourself. If you're only here to draw Kurt Swan Superman, then good luck. Good luck with
Well, you're
just
going to run out of things to draw after a bit.
like come on, man, like expand. And that's why I came to understand that like every story idea comes with its own tenets of a certain lexicon, a certain visual design sense, so that at the end of the day, you as a creator are serving the story,
Yeah.
whether it's a comic book, a play, a movie, a song, whatever, a novel. Come to recognize that because of the format. Why is it a comic? Why is it a movie? And going to the why comics. So I wrote down this thing that I'll just read out loud because it's was meant to provoke.
Wait, let me put on my
As-
glasses. Thank you. Like these do
at the
nothing for me with, like we said in the first episode. This does nothing for me with the computer. Like it's making my eyes
oh,
all kinds of
oh
wacky.
yeah, don't do it, don't do it. You got the mustache, I got the glasses.
Thank
Okay.
you. Yeah, that's how we'll be known.
Um, at the Sundance Film Festival recently, Quentin Tarantino wondered, what is a movie in 2025? He talks about a token 4 week release in the movie theater before it goes into streaming. He considers the current model of cinema as, quote, diminishing returns, which is why he's leaning into writing plays and the power of theater, which is not recorded and much more experience based. My question to you and me is, what is a comic book in 2025?
Yeah, that's a hell of a setup. I didn't realize Tarantino had kind of provoked this question and kind of had those experiences that he was talking about. Well, not entirely. I mean, I didn't know about the plays. I mean, I know that he bought his own theater in Beverly Hills, and he
Yeah.
it's like a revival theater. So he shows like movies that he's into. Movies that kind of like were crucial. Cinema Speculation, if you haven't read it, one of the most incredible books I've read. Of
It's
last.
weirdly a memoir. It's weirdly a
Yes,
memoir.
yes,
And real quick, he has a great podcast he does with Roger Avery and
yes,
Roger's daughter, Gala, and they watch movies and talk about them,
yeah.
and it's great. It's a lot of fun. It's great to draw to, and I don't know. It's like you're hanging out with friends, kind of like what we're doing. And going back to this question, what is a comic in 2025? I feel like we've been trying to answer that question the last four podcasts, and this is our fifth attempt in some way.
Before I forget, the name of Quentin Tarantino's podcast is called Video Archives.
Yes.
Um, and I wanted to correct something from last week while I still have it in my head. The Great Comic Book Heroes was reprinted by Fantagraphics, I believe, in the early 2000s. The problem is it didn't have the comics that were in the original because of all the trademark issues. So it just had all of the essays and all the things that Jules wrote.
Sure.
So it's probably not the experience that you would like to have reading it.
Right.
So,
right.
Now getting back on topic. I'd like the one thing I said to somebody a couple of years ago. They were like, a real man doesn't do this, a real man doesn't do that, blah blah blah. Like one of those things. And so, I had wrote on like the Facebook post that this person wrote this on. I wrote, "It is 2023 or 22, whatever. There's no way to be a man that works for everyone. We're all kind of working it out and kind of,
You mean a definition? You mean a single definition?
right. There's
Right.
not one way to be a man.
Right.
At one point, I wanted to start the podcast, not this one, but I think the first one, by saying, Dean, I look like a bear, but I act like a twink. What am I? You know what I mean? Like, and I think that is like part of what a comic, to answer the question of what a comic is that it's an amalgam of different things. It's
Right.
the only thing I know that a comic is at its core, it's someone's passion. At whose passion is the next question, because if you're working on creator-owned books, obviously it's your passion. If you're working on, as Dean has taught me many years ago, this phrase franchise comics, which means anything published by Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, that is like, part of their franchise. It's at the whim of the editor or the president or the publisher or whatever. So it's definitely somebody's passion at its core. What I think you're asking is, does format matter? Like, or does the way it's presented matter? Because that's where we may or may not differ with each other, or even with whoever's watching this and contemplating the question at the same time. This is a comic, surely. Ultimate Wolverine #1. This is definitely a comic. It feels like a comic. It looks like a comic. It's got colors. It's got word balloons. This is another comic that, hey,
Just
oh, look at
face.
that. I wonder
Hey,
who
look at
did
that.
that one. Um, does it feel like this? Sure. Does it look like this? In some ways, but there's a different feeling to the chest face as opposed to the Ultimate Wolverine. And it's, part of it is the cardstock cover, part of it is the paper quality, part of it is the I don't want to say lack of colors, but the color choices that you put into yours as opposed to the I don't want to say over rendered coloring that most comics use. Um, this is chest face specifically, since it's of the two that I'm talking about. This is curated. The chest face is an experience that a cartoonist wants me to have, whereas this is an ongoing story that's going to maybe pay off in 4 issues or not. Maybe it'll be 10. Maybe it won't ever pay off. But there's a difference between the two. And now that we know that, now that we can, parse those two things, who's to say that as I reach around my bathroom office, this isn't a comic? Now, this is a PS4 game. This is called Lego Brawls. Now, the reason why I'm saying, can this be a comic? Our first inclination is to say, no, it can't be, because it's presented in a medium that is contrary to what comics are. This is a fully interactive experience that you're playing on a screen, whereas comics are a personal. But wait a minute, aren't comics also read on screens? Sure, they are. Digital
Mm-hmm.
comics.
Mm-hmm.
We have one of the pioneers of digital comics talking to me as we speak. So
That's right.
that doesn't disqualify this as being a comic.
Mm-hmm.
What would make this a comic is the story that you tell yourself while you're playing it. That's what I think is. I don't think I'll ever say that this is a comic. I don't think that
Mm-hmm.
I'll ever agree to anyone saying that this is a comic, but I will recognize its potential to be comic-like.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I'm right now. I wish I could actually see a minute or two of this PS4 game because I'm not. Again, Luddite Dean. I don't play
Mhm.
those games. Like I don't do that. Uh, and it's almost like Josh Neufeld's father, Leonard Neufeld. One of his jobs was to write choose your adventure books. And I believe like Alex and Nino drew some of those,
Those
like
are my
back way
favorite.
back in the day, like a long
Yeah.
time ago. But even then, I thought, yes, these are comics, essentially. But the fact that you would come to a fork in the road narratively, and you could choose to go into the cave or jump into the river. If
Mhm.
you jump in the river, go to page 95. If you go into the cave, go to page 88 or something,
Yeah.
right? Like, and you can do both, and it becomes like this weird immersive thing where the reader chooses their adventure, right? And I almost started to think this isn't a comic anymore, because I guess what I'm trying to say is that an author, go to Alan Moore and Dave
Mhm.
Gibbons with Watchmen. They are dictating what the story is. And hopefully setting a pace that you will follow, because when you watch a movie, you're passive. You're just sitting in a seat and watching it, and the story is being told to you.
Mhm.
With a comic book, you're controlling it by turning the pages when you turn the page.
Right.
How much time you spend on a panel or not, right? Most times you read a comic book, you're reading the words, you're glancing at the pictures, but you're just going to the next words, right?
Mhm.
Usually
Mhm.
to get to the story, because that's you're inside the story. And then you might go back and read it again and look carefully at the pictures,
Right.
or how are the pictures working in conjunction as text as well. So, when it comes to moving, I presume the PS4 has moving images, right?
Sure. Sure.
I think what
Just like a
makes a
TV.
comic book is the gutters.
Yes. Yes.
Probably is what makes the comic, is that time in between panels that you decide how much time is between, earning the next panel, as it were, or
And I
getting to
think
the next panel.
that's kind of what Will Eisner taught us, right? Like with
And probably Scott McCloud as well,
Scott
I'm
McCloud,
sure,
yeah, like with
you know.
comics and sequential art,
But
and
then web comics happens, and then you're controlling the pace with your thumb, and even though you're still cutting it up into panels, I don't know. There's a pace. Maybe it's a pacing thing. Does it have to be on paper? Not necessarily, because you can, like you said, you can read it on your screen, and then
mm,
where's paper at that point? And then it is a question I'm asking myself, like, what can I charge for a PDF or a digital version of something where maybe I'm not putting it in print? And is the future of print comics actually it's a deluxe edition because it's in print. Because you're going to, I'm not talking about like your Marvel comics and DC comics that come out every week right now,
Mhm.
but eventually, well, so this is the other side. If I'll just jump in for a second, is for a long time, traditionally, a comic book series came out every 4 weeks,
Right.
which I don't know how. When I think about writing, drawing, lettering, coloring, editing a comic book in 4 weeks, that's not possible. That's not even how it works, right?
Right.
So it probably takes at least 6 weeks at the low end, but probably more like 8 weeks, 2 months to make
Too much.
a monthly comic book, right? And then today I go, why? What? Why are we putting out monthly comic books? Why don't you just put out a
Mm.
comic book when it's ready?
Yeah.
Because of the market, because people are used to that. Well, we need to renegotiate those terms because I think you get a better comic with that takes a little bit more time. I don't mean take forever,
Mhm.
but make it, and then you might get a better experience out of your comic books.
I
And I'm
think
not saying the comics are bad today because I'm not reading most of them. And just to put another name on something, when you were talking about, you didn't necessarily want to call it over rendered coloring and drawing in today's comics.
mhm.
I I think it was Mike Cavallero that coined the term blockbuster comics because they're
Mm.
trying to look like blockbuster movies.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Any
that's what Brian Hitch, uh, a fantastic artist, worked on Warren Ellis's Authority, worked on JLA with Mark Waid, a couple of other things. Brian Hitch was known for what they called widescreen comics because
Right.
everything was just, like blown up and everything was kind of like in your face and the colors and everything, and I think there are two mistakes that we've made in comics in my lifetime, not necessarily in my career, but in my lifetime that I wish we could um, kind of go back and correct. The first one was in 1980, well, I'll say 85, but I think 86 was when it really was really bugging the crap out of me. Um, Dark Knight Returns, Watchmen, all the Grendel, even, like all the black and whites and everything. And they kept on saying comics aren't for kids anymore. And I think what happened was we turned kids off to comics. And ever since then, we've been chasing those kids, trying to get them
I
back to
know.
comic stores. And the only thing that's getting them back is manga and video games. And so,
And Raina
careful with it.
Telgemeier and
And Dad Pilkey, yeah,
Dogman, who just had a movie out this, I
yeah,
think, week that's like apparently getting great reviews, which is
yeah, it
awesome.
looks fantastic.
Congratulations.
I
Yeah,
definitely want to see it. The other
yeah,
mistake we've made is we kind of, at some point, we kind of turned our nose down to certain ways of presenting a comic, like web comics, like mini comics. Like there's not everybody, like I am definitely not in that camp, but there are always people that are like, this isn't a comic, you made it a Kinko's. And 2 years ago, when I went to San Diego, when we were hanging out in San Diego, I think it was 2 years ago, I got in line to wait for a signature by Raina Telgemeier for my daughter. And I said, hey, Raina, can I get a picture for my daughter, of us? And her people were like, we really don't have time for that. She goes, no, he gets a picture. And that's because I bought her mini comic for Jim Hanley's universe before she was Raina Telgemeier. So who's to say that that's not a comic anymore? You know what I mean? Like, why did we
right,
ever
right.
turn our nose down at some of those things? Talking about Josh Neufeld, um, uh, Alex Robinson, like all these guys that I got. Mike Dawson. Oh my God, Mike Dawson on Instagram. His comics are phenomenal. I laugh
Right,
every single time. And
right.
to say that just because it's on Instagram and you have to scroll this way doesn't make it a real comic,
I
I'd
know.
meet you and tell you
Right.
otherwise.
I agree. I
So
agree with you.
I don't know that we can ever correct those mistakes that we've made in that respect. But I think, going forward, we should be open to what a comic can be instead of closed to what it should be. Um,
I mean, it's more exciting that way because why should it be? Whenever I've gone to the comic shop and you used to work in one, there were
mhm,
definitely the buyers who would reject anything that didn't look like that week's Marvel or
right.
DC comic, like which is absurd. It's like I don't think I ever one of my favorite places to go to was a place called See Here, which was mostly zines and
Mhm.
like outlier efforts and news, whatever, newsprint type stuff and or like I don't know. I mean, to me, that's exciting. Like, actually, I don't even want my as close as I like my comics today to look like a comic book. I don't want them to look like those comics because
Sure.
that feels like a little too mainstream for my tastes. Let's just put it that way.
It also doesn't help your comic to stand out from those comics.
Right, right, right,
Granted, I do a comic that is very traditional with a superhero sidekick becomes the superhero hero. And it's gotta, like it's gotta compete. It's ST, so it's gotta compete with Superman, which is right after it, and Spider-Man, which is right before it. It's on
right,
the same shelf. So you got to make sure, like, and the thing is, what I've done in that respect is I've always tried to have my covers at the very least, if not my interiors, look as good, if not better,
right,
than what Marvel and DC are putting out. And
right,
then,
right,
content wise, I built the story to be familiar to people, even if they've never read it before.
right, right.
So,
No, and I think that's key to your work, and in a way you are keeping it evergreen, keeping tradition. And I think I even mentioned that about your style of writing,
mhm,
and I think that that's important because we're losing that already in the Marvel and DC books that I have read.
mhm.
Like I read all of Zeb Wells'
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man run. It was like 60, 66 issues, and it had its ebb and flow, and it's hard to write a monthly Spider-Man comic,
Sure.
especially when maybe 3 or 4 issues come out a month, which is insane. I don't even get that.
Yeah.
Like, it's like there's story arcs with different artists, John Romita Jr. and then what's his name, a bunch of other guys. And you're like, I can't even keep up, and to the
Mhm.
point where I'm like, what are you trying to do? Bum rush me with your Spider-Man comics? Like I'm trying to do my best 24-page comic, right?
Right.
So yes, there's a bias in this question because you want to kind of serve your ideal as it is today, right? As
Mhm.
where you have arrived at, as it were. But I'm also, and I understand that maybe I'm not as marketable because of that. If I could come up with 6 Chest Face or Red Hook or whatever a year, or hell, 12, then I could be in the game, right? I am not in the game at all,
I think you could though. Like I think the maybe let me back that up a little bit. I think at one point you could have done it, and I don't think it was that long ago. I don't think like you're at an age now where you're slowing down. I don't think that's necessarily true. It might be, it might be in small increments, but I think having worked with you and looking over your shoulder and being in your vicinity and seeing how you work, I think you could have probably put out 12 chess faces a year. Absolutely. The thing is, when you're doing it on your own, it's not financially feasible to put out that much work for so little money coming back in. I don't know. I say it all the time. I can't run a Kickstarter. I've run a bunch and I've been successful a bunch. I cannot run a Kickstarter. I'm terrible at them. There are guys that will run a Kickstarter once a month, and it blows my mind. Absolutely blows my mind. So should let's say the market changes with Diamond going bankrupt, because it's going to change slightly, but not in the way that everyone thinks. And the market changes overnight, and Dean is now able to do. Dean, we want 12 issues of Chess Face. Um, you're going to write and draw it, color it, all of that stuff. Someone else will do the printing. You'll get a modest sum of money. That's where we have to like actually negotiate, because a modest sum of money might not pay your bills. You live in New York
Oh,
City.
no, 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 no.
You know what I mean?
It's not worth it. I would have no quality of life.
Right.
I'd be hacking it, to be honest.
Sure.
And I think what's happening as I've gotten older is, I mean, Vito, we do watch movies and TV shows and read comic book. We do indulge stories. how many things do you watch a year where you already know how it's going to end from the first three scenes
I couldn't answer that.
tops?
I'm sure it's a lot. Like,
But let's say half. Let's say half. I'm
yeah.
sure now that you understand story, you probably are figuring out. And not that that's bad. I mean, I think
Mm,
sometimes you're kind of, oh, I hope it does do that, and let's see
yeah.
how it ends, kind of thing. But what I'm saying is, it's I think it's harder for me to craft a story because I'm super aware that, I mean, what did they joke? They joke that Shakespeare already wrote the seven prominent plots,
Yeah.
or whatever, and everyone's just doing their unique twist on it, kind of a thing.
Yeah, but then there's
Um,
the other joke of like the 100 monkeys, the 100 chimpanzees in a room with a typewriter. One of them's going to write Shakespeare.
right, shit. Yeah,
So,
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, you
Right,
sure, like
right,
it's a little of both, when you think about it.
right,
Um,
right.
I don't know,
But I'm
you know,
not trying to outdo myself. I'm not trying to outdo story, outdo art. I just want to write and draw the ones that compel me to sit down and write and draw the
yes.
narratives.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I think I am constantly fighting with the old me and not fighting with him because like he's competition, but I'm fighting to find where I'm better at certain things. Like if I've learned a different camera angle, or if I've learned something other than a dog pile, like for my character to fight out of. Like I
Right,
like it's a process. It's all a process.
right, right,
And I think that if I don't try to outdo the last one, whether it be by adding two extra issues to make it seem bigger, or adding in a bunch of characters that um, make the world seem bigger. Like I'm always trying to find the one thing that will, number one, not take away from the story I'm telling, but also keep that same quality of storytelling that I had from the beginning anyway.
right,
I might know a new
right.
trick, but it's still going to be about a guy who wants to redeem himself.
And it's funny because I may be misremembering this, but I felt like one time we had a conversation, and it might have been in the early stages of Stray, where you had written out a plot for 50 issues of Nightwing, let's just
Yes.
say.
Yeah.
You had your 50 issues, and I was sitting there going, what? Like, I don't have 50 issues of Fantastic Four in me at all. I don't even know if I have one issue. I mean, no, that's not true. I have written some ideas, but I was just like, wow, you are a real fan of this character number one, to the point where you really would love to tackle this.
Mhm.
And now that you've done Stray, do you feel like you have 50 issues of Stray?
I have 50 issues of Stray, and they're not even the same
Wow.
50 issues of Nightwing. There are some, maybe some a modicum of similarities. There is so infinitesimal of like how similar 150 issues versus this other 50 issues would be. But I'm realistic now. I'm now at a point where, because I'm coming up with more characters, more stories, like Underboss, for example, which is Stray adjacent, but it's a look at the bad guys. Um, I kind of want to finish Stray sooner rather than later because
Mm-hmm.
I want to devote my, like, it was very weird coming up with Underboss because the exercise that I had given myself, oh boy, I'm really revealing so much. Um, the exercise I was giving myself was, if Stray is my version of Nightwing and Daredevil, how do I build out his rogues gallery, so to speak? So Nightwing doesn't really have a rogues gallery. They're all Batman's villains. So let's just put that to the side. All right, Daredevil. Let's look at what is uh, a Daredevil archetype villain, And so one of my favorite, absolute favorite Daredevil Spider-Man villains is the Rose, which was Kingpin's son. He wore a purple uh, mask and he had a white suit and a rose here. And so I was like, oh, roses. Like, I remember as a kid, I was like, rose doesn't sound very threatening. You know what I mean?
But it's thorny, but they're thorny.
Sure.
They
Well, of course.
attract and they bite you,
Sure. And they smell so good.
and they
So
smell so good.
I was like, what is a good flower that is like not going to be pleasant? And I came up with hemlock. Hemlock is poisonous. And I'm like, oh, and as soon as you get that name and as soon as you get the visual, you're just like, ugh, that's where
Yep,
the crux of
yep,
it. And so I said, all right, here's my Rose character. What's my Electra character? What's my Gladiator? And and I started building it out. And then I looked at like this kind of family tree of a crime family. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, wow, that's impressive. I could write, and this is how it comes about, Dean, like the whole 50 issue thing. I look at it from afar and I go, I could write 30 issues of this guy's story, or I could write a 4 issue arc of this person's story. And like I look at, and then I just start going, connecting the dots and crossing, like, oh, okay. And then we'll put Stray in here as a guest star. That'll make that a little more compelling. And like suddenly you have something.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
I don't think it's easy. I don't know if I even make it look easy. A person that makes it look easy is Dan Slott. Dan Slott, like we mentioned this in a previous episode, he can hold court for hours telling you about a story he's planning on. And somehow or other, he doesn't give away any spoilers. And then when you read it, you're like, oh my God, he told me about that 30 years ago or
Yeah.
however many years ago. And like, he's so good at plotting like that. And
Yep.
I think part of that is because when you work at Marvel for so long, they value plot over script because it's all the Marvel style. And so you have to like, it's got to be quick. It's got to, you got to get it out there and stuff. And whereas I don't necessarily know how to do that very well. I've written at least one, but maybe two Marvel style scripts in my entire life. And they like the one that I did was with Ray Anthony Height for the Actionverse miniseries of the Midnight Tiger episode issue. And it was because I was working with Ray. And I can tell you what it is. It's just this familiarity of the person I'm working with. I could do it with you. I could do it with Sean. I could do it with Steve Walker. I could do it with a couple of different guys. And it works because we have our own shorthand. Like we can talk to each other that way. But I don't know that like I don't know that I have anything special in terms of like plotting 50 issues. I think that's just number one, psychotic. Number two, it's just, when will I ever get to these? Especially when it's taken me 2 years to put out issue 2 of Stray Volume 3.
Right, and there are many reasons why. It's
Yeah.
economics, it's pandemic stuff, it's
Mhm.
the way the world of comics and the industry perceives comics, and what is the fan base, and I don't know. Right now, I've experimented for 2 years to see who can I mail my original comic book to. That's
Mhm.
based, and then sell at a table once in a blue, right? That's not a business model. I'm not being a businessman. I need to figure this stuff out. But quickly, just to respond to something about you were talking about Daredevil villains.
Mhm.
The minute I started thinking in my own head, well, what makes a Daredevil villain? And obviously, it's leaned into crime.
Mhm.
Daredevil's more of a crime fighter, let's say, uh, because he has agility and he can hear well and smell. Like his sight is profound, in other ways. But I always felt like some of my favorite Daredevil stories were the ones where it was the Matt Murdock in the courtroom dealing
Mhm.
with the criminal he fought with as Daredevil, and the lines he might have been crossing ethically,
Sure.
you know. And I believe there have been definitely stories told like that. And I was thinking, who wrote the She-Hulk miniseries? Was it Dan Slott or Charles Soule? It
I
might
think Charles did.
with who?
I think Charles Soule did.
With it was like 12 issues, and it was mostly drawn by like Javier Polito,
Yeah,
I
that was
believe,
Charles. That was Charles. I think.
and Ron Wimberly, I think, drew two
Mhm.
issues. And I remember loving that because it really was courtroom heavy
Yeah.
and dealt with those issues of being a hero and yet you're also a lawyer, and then dealing with the person that you fought in the streets with or not, or
Mhm.
what are the ethics. And I thought that was an interesting. So I don't know. I don't know what my Daredevil story would be if I had to come up with one.
I mean,
Or
like, and it's not like I said, it wasn't for any desire to write Daredevil. It was just it was basically. I swear to you, I just sometimes like to do these mental exercises in my head and just
yeah,
go, all right, this is an idea. Let's try this idea, and then let's blow it up and see where it comes. So that idea for Underboss became. like I said, a crime family, and then it became the idea of doing Daredevil villains as if they were the main characters in the story. And then somehow or other, I came up with a dopey idea. Oh, let's do it as a Thunderbolts pastiche where the villains are becoming heroes, and then we have to figure out, like a bigger question of this is the okay. We're really blowing up the inside of it. So
Well,
I
and just to respond quickly, that's what the Red Hook started off as,
yeah
a
yeah
thief, you know.
and what happened was and you'll remember that I reached out to you. I contacted a couple of people, you, Charlie McKelvey, who does Spider Squirrel and currently ending American Yakuza on Kickstarter. Scott Fogg, who I've worked with on Action Lab, Dog of Wonder, and a couple of other things. And I said, who is the crime boss of this area? And I asked you about New York, and going back to how we ended, um, well, how you ended, I should say, Red Hook for the time being.
And the New Brooklyn status, as it
Right.
were.
Like
Yeah.
how, like who's the head of crime? And I wanted to use Al Dente at one point because he was the last person, I think. And you're like, no, like he's kind of not in the mental capacity to be a crime boss, even if it was like as a figurehead. So we started
Well,
thinking
actually, just a quick correction. So Al Dente is or not dead because of Benson Hurst, but
that's
Benson
I'm
Hurst. So,
right,
yeah, so Benson Hurst's head got cracked, and he's not in the right mental state to
right,
do anything but maybe eat soup
and watch TV.
and watch TV. Right.
So um
So I don't think there is an underboss, right? It's like open.
right. But as we talked about it, we said, what if there was a hero that was acting like a villain, kind of in the same way that Green Hornet did?
Right.
And we both landed on OMG, one man gang.
Yep.
And you actually just spurted out one man gangster. And so that was just like, that's the answer.
That's
So
right.
I was looking for a way to, and I said this to Charlie too. I was looking for a way to create a kind of database of supervillains that could be interchangeable in that Marvel way amongst the Blind Squirrel Zion Studios books. One might pop in another chest face episode issue down the road or whatever. Like it was just the idea of one of these episodes. We're going to talk about public domain and Creative
Hmm.
Commons because that was just something that I think I kind of got my fame over. But the idea that if I pool my resources with everyone and we share the same resources and we're like going back and forth, isn't that fun? Like,
Oh my God.
and what is comics if it's not fun? Like, I
Uh,
think that's the answer that I was saying earlier too. That like a comic can be any format, but it's got to be passion. It's got to be
yeah.
fun.
Passion, fun.
It's got to
It's
be
funny you say that because like I got to know a lot of the I got to meet and befriend Jim Salicrup, Danny Fingeroth. I knew Denny O'Neil back in the when he was alive, and that's how I mean I met him through his son Larry, who I went to high school with. I mean I've known so many different names and editors, Ralph Macchio, oh God,
and
so Mark Panisha, all these guys, and like because their names were in the credits of the comics I pulled off the newsstand, back in the day. Um, and why am I bringing this up? You were just saying something, and I was
about fun
veering.
and sharing
Oh,
sharing.
about fun. And Tom DeFalco,
Mhm.
okay, and Hildy Mesnick, and I wrote an email that he hasn't responded to yet, and I had this weird little fantasy pipe dream. I was like, Tom, you used to write. You were the editor in chief of Marvel. I don't know if he was the actual editor of the Fantastic Four, but he wrote the Fantastic Four with I think artist Paul Ryan. Was that his
Mhm.
name? I
Mhm.
think. And it occurred to me because he's fun to talk to, and he also wrote one of my favorite Marvel 2-in-1s, which is the Thing and the Sandman in a bar.
Yeah.
You know. Anyway, drawn by Ron Wilson, one of my favorite comics ever. And I was like, I would love to have a session with you in current times and pretend that you're an editor of Fantastic Four and I'm the hired writer. and I'd like to have a powwow session of what to build out an issue of the Fantastic or a story for the Fantastic Four. I want to know what that was like to be at Marvel and have to do that,
Mm.
you know, with an editor like that. Like, my experience, I've either done like 10 pages here or one issue there or whatever here and there. And then the most I've ever experienced in terms of working with an editor will be Paul Kaminsky and Alex Segura on the Fox.
Yeah.
But basically, unless I had a mandate, and I had a little bit more of a mandate on the second one, I did the Fox, that story is called Freak Magnet. And then the second one, God, now I can't remember the name of the second story.
I'm looking
But
to see if I have it here.
if you have it, but I, um, I basically pitched my idea, and maybe there was a couple of notes back, but it wasn't like sitting down with like, what are we going to do this month with these characters,
Mhm.
And speaking of character, the one thing I learned in pitching TV show ideas, which is similar to comics, at least franchise comics or
Mhm.
serialized comics, is that plot is secondary to character.
Mm.
And I didn't understand that. I was like, what do you mean? Don't we need to have a story where there's a beginning, middle, end, or a twist or this and that? And they're like, no, because people come back for the characters.
Yeah.
You can have them do anything you want. They can go, the episode could be about Peter Parker needs to buy a suit. Of course, other things happen,
Mm.
but the story is him trying to buy a suit, maybe for the dance or a funeral or whatever, But like, keep it easy and simple,
Mm.
in those ways. So I did the older I get, the more I realize how character is more important than plot, and it all comes down to story when you merge the two. But character is what has people coming back
Little
to
known
that
fact.
character.
Little known fact. I wrote a Stray pilot for television, and it wasn't about like. And the thing that I was responding to is we were saying character over plot. I got hung up on mechanics, formatting of the script, and my co-writer Jacob Cooney, he was like, "Just write it. Don't worry about it.
Sure,
We can all figure it out."
figure it
And,
out.
it's a weird kind of like I'm not used to that. I'm used
Mm-hmm.
to like formatting my script in
Page one, panel one.
right. And so like to say like and it's an adaptation of the first issue. So to look at the first issue and then try to translate it and stuff and
Right.
and going back to the whole thing about gutters and like the things that happen in between gutters of panels is where the imagination happens. I have to take that and actually put it onto the page for the screen, and it's a totally
Right.
different animal, man.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Well, I don't know if you want to wrap this up. I did have a couple other questions. I'm going to save one for the next one that we
Okay.
do. And I have a really silly one, but
I wanted to ask you a question that occurred to me today. And
okay.
it's funny, we kind of touched on it earlier, talking about Alan Moore and like the comics of the 80s and stuff. And even like the cartoons that we watched. But it has nothing to do with cartoons, nothing to do with movies or comics. It's music. Do you recall the what is the oldest song you can recall? Not in terms of when it was made, but in terms of your memory. Like what's the first song you remember hearing?
There's two because I'm basing this on when I finally got my allowance as a kid and I could
Mm.
go spend it on something besides comic books. And I remember buying a 45 record of Diana Ross, the theme from Mahogany.
Oh my God, I love you. How who are you? Sometimes I have to ask.
And the second record I bought that I remember was the 12-inch version of Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang.
I was hoping you'd say the theme from Mahogany.
Dude, one of the first concert I ever went to, I think I was 12. My dad took me, my brother, and Diana Ross opens up. It was Diana Ross. She opens up and she comes down off the stage and she walks right up to me. And I have pictures of me
Oh,
and Diana Ross. And then my dad said another time later on when she was like doing something at the Beacon Theater, because I lived in the Upper West Side at 79th Street and Broadway. And so here she was down the block or whatever. And he had written an article with her in it or something.
mhm.
And he gave it to me to knock on her limo window when she was in there. And apparently she opened the door, saw the thing, saw me. I went in and I was in there for 20 minutes and I have no memory of this.
Was
My
the
dad
was
was like, "What is Diana Ross doing with my son in the
Yeah,
back of a
really.
limo?"
The concert that you saw with her, was that Central Park?
No, this was in a theater of
Okay.
sorts. No, it was inside. And and oh God, how did she always start her concerts? I can't remember the song right now,
That's all
but
right.
no, Diana Ross, man. Like,
Man, I love
here
that.
we go, gang. What about you?
The very first memory of a song I have hearing it on the radio was, oddly enough, it was in the 80s, and it was Smokey Robinson singing "Being with You." So it's like late Smokey Robinson. It's like uh post the Miracles, and
Right.
it's like one of his solo albums, and it's like the first song I remember hearing on the radio, even though I know I listened to music before that and had listened to like other stuff before that. That's my first earliest memory, but I know for a fact that I had to have heard Kiss earlier than that, because my aunt
By
Camille,
Prince?
no, Kiss,
Oh,
like,
Kiss the band.
yeah.
Sorry.
Um, Sorry, I realized where the disconnect was. Yeah, because they had done Destroyer, the album Destroyer is the four of them standing and stomping on like mountains or something like that, and
Right.
like, like Gene Simmons like that or whatever. And I remember just being so enamored with the cover that my aunt played it for me, and I definitely listened to that album a million times over.
Right.
Just whenever I would go to my grandparents' house, I would sneak
Right.
into her room and I would listen to Kiss Destroyer. But my memory of what song stood out is so not there. Kind of like, what song does Diana Ross open the concert with? Like, I can't remember
Right. Right.
what Kiss song
Right.
was
Right.
like.
Ain't no mountain high enough might be the song or
Sure.
something, like,
And so,
but
but that Smokey
yeah.
Robinson song, just like, I can recall, like having
Hmm.
a little transistor radio of my own and having
Hmm.
like AM station that was playing like American Top 40 or something by Casey Kasem.
Sure. Casey Kasem and all those, before MTV, before all that stuff happened. It was the
Yeah.
radio, and I don't even remember how I heard these songs and why I needed to buy this song and own it.
I feel like for
Like,
you, growing up on the Upper West Side, music was just coming out of windows and coming out of cars, and just it
right,
was everywhere. Whereas in Staten Island, um, there was some of that, but not like it would be in New York. Like, th- people are more private, when I was growing up.
right,
And I think you got to live in a world that was so open and so expressive, and people were artistic and just talking about the arts and stuff. Whereas at Staten Island, it's like people were talking about work.
oh yeah, blue
Yeah.
collar
Yeah.
concerns. Where I was like going to Sam Goody or eventually Tower Records, and there used to be a record shop a couple blocks from my uh, apartment building, and I'm blanking on his name right now, and I'm trying to describe him. He played a little kid in commercials, like a chubby little kid with red hair, like a page boy. Do you know what
Like
I'm talking
Mikey
about?
from the Life commercials.
Is it Mikey?
Yeah, from the Life commercial, Life cereal.
Let me just do Mikey from Life Cereal, because that kid, no, it wasn't him. This was
Yeah.
another kid actor who, I hate to say it, but he didn't turn out so well. And he was selling records in the back, and I'm like, that's that kid from the commercials, but he became a giant version of that kid instead of like what one. And then you start to realize a lot of kids actors that get hired have that kid face.
Yeah.
They never lose that kid face, no matter how, I don't know if they get cut and strong or
Mhm.
obese. There's always that, like, and it's almost disturbing in some ways. Like, the guy was nice and all, but anyway, if I can remember his name, I'll save it for the next. I'll remind us in the next episode. Did you want me to ask you a really silly question, or
Please,
should we?
please,
You
palate
sure?
cleanse. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I wrote this one down too. So, uh, here we go. Okay. I live in Brooklyn and you live in Pittsburgh.
Mhm.
Do you know what the Brooklyn Cyclones are?
Yeah, they're the minor league team, the baseball team.
Minor league, and like, look at me. The one hat I have, which aren't even my colors, right? It's like
Right.
blue and tan with a white logo. Is the Brooklyn Cyclones because I went
Mhm.
to a Brooklyn Cyclones game. It happened to be a night where they were giving out hats, so I got a hat. Now I wear it when in the rain, like tonight.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
here's my question. Here's my question. You thought that was the question.
No, no. I mean, if that was,
Uh,
I can't stand you. Like,
you're
how can
right.
you
That's
ask a question
horrible.
like that?
Why would I do that? And
Yeah.
their home field is next to Coney Island.
Yes.
Anyway, my question to you is, what is a Pittsburgh platter and why is it called that? Is there an origin or is it just a funny alliteration? And then I have a bonus question.
I don't see. I don't know what a Pittsburgh platter is. I feel like that's like a he's hiding because this is also an audio medium, and people might just listen to the audio version. Dean is hiding his face in his shirt because he doesn't want. He must know something about what a Pittsburgh platter is. It's
Go ahead
probably
and
something.
type it into Google.
No, 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 no. I'll let everyone else do that. I feel like
What do you
a
imagine
Pittsburgh.
it to be?
Would I imagine it to be akin to a Cleveland steamer?
I think you might be right about that.
Okay.
Does it involve a glass table?
Yeah, a Cleveland steamer does. So
Okay, and then my
they're the same thing, I guess. Um, and what was the follow-up question?
so the bonus question is um is have you ever performed an upper decker?
No, but I know somebody who did. His
Oh
name is
wow.
his name is Matt DeCio, and it was at a in Staten Island. There was a punk rock show, and I believe, they were closing down the venue. He not only did an now let me remember an upper decker. It's when you take the lid off the back of the
Of
toilet,
the tank
and
of
then
the
you put,
toilet
like,
and you
yes. So
take
yes,
a
he did
dump
do
in the
that.
tank. And then every time you're flushing, it's just what the hell's going on with my toilet?
Yes, yes, he did do that, and he was very proud of himself. But we were just like, why? Like,
Why?
why would you do that to
And
anyone?
just the balance alone, the balancing
Yeah.
act alone, right?
Oh my
Like
God.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Good old
All
Matt
right. Well,
DeCio. I'll tell stories about Matt DeCio one of these days. There's some good ones.
that's great. I love stories like that. And so actually that was a little exercise in character over plot, I think. Because yes, there is the why, but I don't think you can ever really answer the why.
Hey, before we go, you are appearing at a convention in Connecticut, I believe. It is like
Oh no,
relatively.
no, no. That'll be in the future. Like in April, the
Okay.
Independent Comics Creators Con type in Connecticut, and I think that's April. But on the February 15th and 16th, I believe that's the weekend in a couple of weeks, I'll be at Cosmic Con New York.
That's what I was thinking.
It was in Queens the last 4 years, and I've never attended. And I'm going as a guest, and I'll be on two panels. And in fact, I think we're hoping to have another guest of the show, Marty Keene,
Mhm.
on this podcast coming up soon. And he too will also be at that show and on one of the panels that I'm moderating that we can talk about more then.
Yeah, I will put the link in our show notes. So if you're interested in going to see Dean live, you can do yourself a favor and get tickets to the show. It's in New York City. Why not?
Why not? Right?
All right, let's end this with a good old yay yay.
Yeah, yeah.
We will see you guys next time. Until then, thank you very much and have a good week.
Good night, y'all.